Good morning. I'm Teresa Scorset. It is Tuesday, October 27th, 2015, and this is Can We Talk? Our ongoing series with Jim Rothstein is still very much alive. Jim, we've got a lot of things to discuss, so let's just jump right in. I'm going to start with the resolution. It's Resolution 2014-08 that was sent by the City of St. Martin, which of course is your city. Jim is the mayor of St. Martin, to the governor of Minnesota. And I want to know, I've got the resolution here. I'd like to know what that was about in your words and what happened after you sent it to him.
Well, I'd gladly tell you. The reason the City Council of St. Martin passed the resolution, we had two victims that were ready to be forced into prostitution. And because, I knew what was going on and recognized it, I also had somebody in the organization who alerted me that they were ready to move on these two girls. So I took action and I stopped them from being taken. And as a result of that, the City of St. Martin passed this resolution 2014-08, which goes, and if anybody wants a copy of it, they can call the show here. They have copy. Teresa and Robin have copies of it. And it was sent to the governor of the state of Minnesota. A number of other cities have passed it, but what's amazing is the cities that haven't. And I find that very interesting that somebody would not want to pass this resolution.
Well, let's talk about the resolution before we get into the result. I'm sorry, do you have a copy of it? Can you just give us a kind of an outline of it?
Well, the resolution starts off with identifying, opening up with the whereas as to why we need it and what has to be done. And then the actual parts of it that would be passed into law are such as this. Any person or entity who uses human trafficking, children, child porn, pedophilia to compromise, extort, or cause another person to do an unwilling act shall be guilty of a felony with a mandatory 25 to life prison term. Actually, I had the death penalty, but we had some nuns on our trafficking committee at the time, and they were against the death penalty.
Yes.
But what makes this so important is that the compromise part. And for the first time, just 3 weeks ago, Fox News was the only one who has ever mentioned human compromise. And that is the most powerful thing in human trafficking there is. That's how they've been able to stop any legitimate laws to be passed or anything, because everybody's compromised. Number two, any person or entity that buys, sells, trades, or in any way promotes, enables, or profits from human trafficking, pedophilia, human compromise, extortion, or the use of children in a criminal manner shall be guilty of a felony. Again, 25 to life. It should be the death penalty. The third one, and that's why anybody who uses these to compromise somebody is guilty of a crime. Now, the use of electronics, social media, or any form of communication to facilitate, promote, or further human trafficking, child porn, pedophilia, human compromise, extortion, or use of children in a criminal manner shall be a felony with a mandatory fine of $1 million per incident and a 10-year prison sentence for each party involved. Now, you see, this covers the part of the computers. Anyway, if a pimp waves a girl across the street, he's facilitating prostitution, human trafficking. So that goes there. The last one, any person, any person, agency, or the entity that interferes, threatens, harasses, impedes, or in any way compromises an investigator, investigation, prosecution, or witness in human trafficking shall be guilty of a felony mandatory 5-year prison term. Now, here is the part you wonder, why aren't the police doing more? And I think later we'll go into some of the things they're doing now. Any police officer, may he be county, state, federal, including the FBI, or any other agency that has ever gone after any major investigations in human trafficking, their jobs are gone and they're ruined for life. And again, I can cite name after name, case after case of where that happened. Now, the last one, this is the one that will stop almost all the legislation, because this is what it says. Any enforcement agency, agent, prosecutor, and this is the, in particular, elected government official or any other authority that fails to act with due haste on human trafficking, pedophilia, or the criminal use of children complaint, and then fails to complete the investigation of the complaint shall be guilty of a felony. That would mean every elected official, sheriffs, governors, senators, congressmen, anybody who's elected to a public office. So these are the things, if we pass them, you will see trafficking drop 85 to 90%.
Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful?
But you're not going to see it just for the reasons that I cite the last two, where they're not made to do their job. So that's what we passed.
All right, so that's what you sent to the governor.
Yep.
And the governor sent it along to the Board of Health, as I understand it, which seems like a very strange place for it to all end up. I don't know why.
Well, I will tell you, I was utterly amazed when I got this letter dated September 16, 2014, signed by Edward P. Ellinger, Minnesota Department of Health, where the information was given to him by the governor to act on. Now, my question right off the bat was, I wonder what doctors they have here who have arrest powers.
Yeah.
Have you heard? I haven't heard of any.
No, I haven't
But
either.
of all people, the Board of Health to get it. So I waited. And then on 7/21/15, I contacted Sandy at the Minnesota Department of Health. What I had done was called to talk to Ellinger. And that was at telephone number 651-201-5804. And I told her about the letter and that, and nothing happened. On 8/15-15, I again contacted Sandy, and she referred me to a Mark Kindy at 651-201-5447. And he set up a meeting for me to come out and see me to discuss this. Plus, I gave him a case of a young girl who ended up being put into prostitution after I had warned them a year ahead of time. And at the last minute, he canceled the meeting. On 9/1/15, I left a message for him. I never got a call back. On 9/3/15, I left a message. Never got a call back. On 9/14, I left a message and never got a call back. So I get it. It don't take me long to figure out that they don't want to talk to me.
And do we want to give the public those phone numbers so they can call?
Sure. That's why I said the number I called for Sandy again was 651-201-5804, and for Mark was 651-201-5447. So I think the public should call them and ask them, you know, since the governor put you in charge, why don't you call back?
Yeah, why don't you do something?
Yeah, and I think they should ask for it. We are the people of the state of Minnesota. We're entitled to that.
Right.
And then ask them how come the governor sent it to them in the first place.
Can I interrupt for just one
Sure.
second to do a little, I forgot to introduce Robin Hensel. I guess I just assumed anyone who ever watches the show knows Robin by sight, but this is of course Robin Hensel, what are we calling you these days? The crazy sign lady was the last title I heard for her.
Who knows what people are calling me?
Who
Lots
knows?
of things on that spectrum.
I'm sure.
Lots of things I was called. I want to mention this human compromise that's in here. The fine art of using personal discretions of sex laws, morality norms, marital vows, or any other act not condoned by society to compromise a person. In other words, if you can find dirt in somebody's sexual past,
Yeah.
you can blackmail them.
Yes, not only sex, but in anything else.
Right.
There are proclivities that go against the social norms and all of that. And when I was a detective in the New York Police Department, at a very early stage when I was put into fighting human trafficking, I learned how powerful that was. And then later on, when we found out how high these things have gone and what has happened to them, human compromise is the last thing they want to discuss when it comes to human trafficking. It has brought down presidencies, it's senators. I personally confronted senators. It took down admirals. In fact, Admiral Forrestal in Church, because of one of my informants was extorting him. This was before he was working with me. They committed suicide. And you will find many suicides are linked to this. And the latest one we just had is Hastert. He just quit over this type of stuff. So human compromise, and from one of my top informants, Robert Merritt, he says, and he had been in the White House, working this, that 70% of them across the board, that includes judges, law enforcement, everything, are compromised. So that's what human compromise is. It's the most powerful one and the one least addressed. Like I said, the only one I ever heard it on was Fox News.
And I want to also add, I think I should just read this that's in the
Sure.
back of this one book you have here
Yeah.
on the guidelines for victims' family response. The purpose and need for this resolution is the biggest misconception about prostitution is that if you stop the demand, the tricks, the supply or the prostitutes will disappear. It will have minimal effect. This is only true in theory or in a clinical analysis by people who have no clue what they're talking about. Their formulas do not factor in the power of what many view as Mother Nature or the birds and the bees. Prostitution provides quick access to sex, not otherwise so easily obtainable in many situations by the purchasing of it from someone willing to sell it. And let's talk about the prostitution stings that have been made by the FBI recently in this close proximity of Little Falls when I get done reading this here. Traffickers, pimps are not part of Mother Nature, and their removal is essential to control prostitution and trafficking. Determining what trafficking really means is of utmost importance. Some, not all, runaways and homeless people in need of money to survive will resort to prostitution for a source of income. They are soon recruited by prostitutes in the street to join the harem and pimp they belong to. If they resist, they're forced to work for another pimp. Nobody works for themselves in the street. If you classify the enslaved victims as runaways or homeless, they are not crime statistics and need not be reported. Thus, you have a cover-up, and the facts are kept from the public. Naive clinical researchers take this as documentation and that the core of prostitution is based on runaways and homeless to form their politically correct feel-good, do-good analysis. They fail to put the most important factor, the pimps, into the equation. Thus, a total farce is perpetrated on the public and compounds the problem by endangering the lives of the victims. These laws are based on real victims, real cases, real investigations, real public hearings, real findings, real cover-ups, and real cases of clinical research being flawed. These laws are written in a grassroots form rather than legalese so that the public will understand them. If Resolution 2014-08 is not included in any legislation concerning prostitution, human trafficking, etc., the legislation is doomed to failure, endangering the lives of the victims, and is a waste of taxpayer money. Without taking the traffickers, pimps, out of the prostitution trafficking equation, all the social programs of the politically correct, feel-good, do-good, awareness, recovery, etc., will not work. Once the traffickers' pimps have been removed, the social programs will work and are absolutely necessary. This is another complicated subject, but is easily addressed. And in the beginning of, right here, I think it was, guidelines for family response, victims' family response, there is no case that can't be solved. That's really interesting.
Yes, and that was put together by myself and Noreen Gosh, the mother of one of the first 4 boys that ended up in that series of kidnappings, which ended with the Jacob Wetterling kidnapping in St. Joseph. So we put that together, and you would be amazed how few people know what to do when they have something happen like that. And it's available. It's probably the only thing you've ever seen like it, and it's very accurate. It's my mother and myself, so we know what's in it.
Yeah, that does sound like a very useful document. Why is it that when the police do decide to go after prostitution, they arrest the prostitutes, they arrest the Johns, but it seems as if the pimps are just bulletproof?
Well, that is exactly my point.
Yeah.
And it's been going on that way. Like I said, I started on this in New York City, and I got put on working prostitution by the captain, Louis Groman of the 16th Precinct. Number one, we found that so many of the girls in New York were from Minnesota. And since I was from Minnesota, the captain decided I should take care of my own mess. And that's how I got put on work
Your
at this.
mess.
I didn't want, in no way did I want, nobody wants to work prostitution. But anyhow, I got into it, and in less than 30 days, and I picked, there was 5 other guys that I picked. I can't use the name that it was called because of modern political correctness, you know, but there was definitely a name that fit the situation.
I'm sure there was.
And within less than 45 days, we on the posse, as it was called, it had another word with it, and you can rhyme it with it, but anyhow, we found that everything that we had believed, or even the police department believed about prostitution, was totally wrong. We've learned real quick that all these girls were working for pimps, and they were forced and had to earn a certain amount of money. And that's how we got into and started finding out what was really going on. And we made great headways on it. And that very first year, I started about March in 1966. And it come about September, July, August, September in there, we advised the police department that there was a great danger to our undercover officers who were arresting prostitutes because the pimps were starting to work the streets with them to make sure that they knew what was going on. And the undercover men, nobody knew they were cops, and sure as heck, one night, this guy Campese, a young cop, great cop, went to arrest this girl, and the pimp didn't know, and he went and stabbed the cop to death.
Oh, dear.
So, again, they didn't listen because what did us cops know?
Yeah.
Well, with that, I got assigned to the next step of this was to work and find out what was really going on. And I was what they call cut loose. I was given unlimited money, and my job was to know what was behind all of this. So I got to travel all over the country, and we put it all together. I worked with different cops. Sometimes we had as many as 100 detectives working this. And every time we would get to that level above the street, we were stopped. There were 3 separate investigations that were stopped.
Why did they put you out there if they knew you couldn't penetrate beyond a certain...
Well, see, there was the good side and the bad side in the police department. There were honest cops, bosses that wanted to know, and then you had the corrupt guys who were defending all this human compromise. Mm-hmm. And almost every one of them that was behind stopping us had been compromised. But finally, the governor of the state of New York appointed me to the New York State Select Committee on Crime. That was over the police commissioner mayor's head. That was about 1976. And I was assigned on a special investigation with a partner by the name of Matthew Rosenthal. And again, we went to work on that. We worked about 3 years. And eventually, even the governor of the state of New York got stopped after we started locking up some big name people. We even uncovered a point, again, using human compromise, where certain entities, and one in particular, was using little boys to compromise people. And one night on East 64th Street in New York, they killed 2 14-year-olds and a 15-year-old while they were having sex with them.
Oh, my God.
And the only mistake they made was they did it in one of my informants' apartment. By this time, I had informants everywhere, all over the country, at the highest levels. And eventually I identified the guy and met with him, and physically, face to face, myself and Detective Rosenthal served him with a subpoena for the New York State Select Committee on Crime, because we were holding testimony at the time. And he told us that we would be stopped with national security before we got back to the office. And lo and behold, within less than a half an hour, which it took us to get to a phone, in those days you didn't have mobile phones, and when we called the office, they had been informed national security had been invoked.
Oh my God.
And my question always has been, what part of our National Security Act allows them to kill little boys?
Yeah.
Or girls? That was, because this was, and human compromise, I discovered that very early in my investigations on what was happening to people that were compromised and such. So this is a quick synopsis, and we can go through this stuff. But that was, it just kept going. And then one day I got retired. That's why I know anybody who ever worked this gets retired. And we can go in later on some of the investigations that we did and what happened to them. So I think that's a good way to start this.
Yes. The question of human compromise interests me because I was thinking, all right, you'd have to live a very, very clean, almost pristine life in order to avoid being compromised if you were in a position where somebody needed to shut you up. And then it crossed my mind, well, no matter how clean your life might be, they could start a rumor and spread the innuendo, and you could end up convicted in the press and in the public opinion of nearly anything, whether you'd ever come close to those particular crimes or not. So it's a miserable business, and it's hard to
Yes,
see where the core is.
And we did address that very much in our investigations, and the most classic case on that was Father Bruce Ritter. He was the guy that had the Covenant House in New York and helped kids. And after I retired, they went after him and accused him of being a pedophile. And I knew, because I had infiltrated his operation from day one. And there were three particular investigations that I did into his activities, and there was never even a hint. But like you said, after I was gone, and he was the guy that had all the files, because every kid that came through the Covenant House, he kept the file on, and they all talked. And it was the most powerful files you ever saw.
Oh, I can imagine.
And
Now, that's
yeah,
all in here, right?
yes, and that is mentioned in the complaint I just filed with the Pope's new tribunal for bishops and such not doing their jobs. We can go into that later.
Right. But one thing I want, Teresa, before we go further,
Yeah.
you have a sheet over there on that famous psychologist.
Yes.
I'd like you to read that statement, and then let's talk about this letter to Charlie Rose.
Yes.
All right, this was written by Carl Jung, a contemporary of Freud and the developer of a particular kind of psychology, Jungian psychology. Anyone who wants to know the human psyche will learn next to nothing from experimental psychology. He would be better advised to abandon exact science, put away his scholar's gown, bid farewell to his study, and wander with human heart through the world. There, in the horror of the prisons, lunatic asylums, and hospitals, in drab suburban pubs and in brothels and gambling halls, the salons of the elegant, the stock exchanges, socialist meetings, revivalist gatherings, ecstatic sects, through love and hate, through the experience of passion in every form in his own body, he would reap richer stores of his knowledge than a textbook a foot thick would give him. And he will know how to doctor the sick with a real knowledge of the human soul. That's very powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And now,
Well, just to add to that,
Yeah.
when we were doing the investigation that the governor started, we also brought in the Policy Science Corporation, which was a think tank operation out of New York, Washington, and all over the world, which was headed by a guy named Harold Laswell, who had been a Freudian scientist and was into all of this. And I remember on one of our meetings, we'd get together and sit there and smoke $25 cigars and drink $500 bottles of brandy, you know, and do some philosophizing. But one night he told me, he said, Jim, all the studies that we have done on this are absolutely useless till we ran into you guys who worked the street and knew these people and dealt with them. And we hear it now, which I only got this here a couple of months ago, but it's so true, because everything, I'll give you an example again, involves Minnesota. I used to go deer hunting in Black Duck, Minnesota. And one year, all the cops and hookers got together. When I went deer hunting, when they were arrested, they put down that they were born in Black Duck, Minnesota. Isn't that wonderful, you know? So now I come back, and this was in November, naturally. In March, April, one of the big universities with one of the leading research psychologists, psychiatrists on that, they went and did a study. So they check official police records, and there they were, 400 and some hookers from Black Duck, Minnesota. Now, these are official records, right? They never bothered looking to see how many people lived in Black Duck. And for years, this was used. Now you can't even find it anymore. But for years, they used that. So this is why I say you got to be, and that's why Carl Jung was so right. And everything he mentions in there, I was there.
Yeah.
In fact, it was rumored I knew every back door to these places, and that was true.
Wow.
So, yes.
So this letter, written October 4th, 1993, to you, and your address at the time was Copiague, New York. As chairman of the Subcommittee on Specialty Corps and Natural Resources of the House Committee on Agriculture, I and my staff have been conducting an ongoing investigation into the problem of child abuse and pedophilia in the United States. I have found this issue to be extremely distressing and clearly in need of action. It has come to my attention that you, as a former detective of the New York Police Department, may have certain information which will further this investigation. I am therefore inviting you to come to Washington, D.C. for the purpose of discussing certain initiatives which the Congress could undertake in the areas of child abuse and pedophilia. It's my hope that we can do this at your earliest convenience. I look forward to our meeting. And then, should you have any further questions, and it names a name here. And it's signed Charlie Rose, Chairman, Subcommittee on Specialty Corps and Natural Resources.
Yes, that was, and in response to that, I wrote the confidential report on human trafficking. And that report has been kept up to date as I went along. But I did go to Washington. I met with the people. There were 5 people on the committee. And I was there a couple of days and briefed everybody and gave them the whole insight on it. And the interesting thing about that is what happened after I left. Out of the 5 congressional people, only 1 ever ran for office again, and that was Barbara Mikulski from Maryland. The rest, Charlie Rose and the others who remain nameless, never ran for office again. So whatever happened there, it was shut down. But I did go there, and like I said, for 2 days or so, it was even longer, I think, and briefed them exactly what was happening. And what's interesting is the committee he was on, because it did affect the farm communities.
I was wondering what the
Yes,
connection
and,
might be.
Yes, because that was affecting, really hurting, especially the Minnesota. That's why it was called the Minnesota Strip, because of the inordinate amount of victims that came from Minnesota. And I spent a lot of time here. We touched on that in the last show. And Stearns, Morrison, Cass, and Crow Wing counties were of particular interest because the number of victims that came from here. And that has not changed one iota. So this is why people want to see, it's right here in a letter, and there's others. In fact, I have another one here as to the resolution, and this one was written, as you can see, to Senator John Cornyn, from Texas, who had sponsored a Human Trafficking Act of 2013, Senate 413, and HR 906. And this was sent by Douglas Caddy. Doug Caddy was the lawyer for the Watergate burglars, which ties directly to human trafficking, why that break-in took place. And when he sent that to him, and he addresses the fact that the city of St. Martin had passed that, and it was closely and heartily backed by Franken and Klobuchar. The only one who ever called me was one of Franken's people. Klobuchar's office never called. So this is where this resolution went through our Congress and everything. And this is one of the people who helped put that together.
Well, I'm just going to read the first 2 paragraphs of this, maybe 3. On the streets, and that's part of this,
Confidential.
Report.
the report
Yeah.
that Jim gave to
Yeah.
this Charlie Rose. On the streets of every city in America, there are thousands of children, both boys and girls, selling themselves into prostitution. They come from homes, schools, and institutions, churches, and the list is never ending, and I might add, probably a lot out of the foster care system. Almost nothing is done to discourage this. Some of these children are on their own, others are preyed upon by older children who exploit them. Surrounding and controlling these children who have been manipulated and forced into utter physical, sexual, and emotional degradation in their daily lives are their procurers and abusers who are even more depraved. If these procurers, traffickers, and abusers who criminally and sexually exploit these children for commercial purposes, pornography, prostitution, extortion, blackmail, and human compromise, not to mention larceny, burglary, and other criminal activities. Police make many arrests of child molesters and pedophiles who troll for children around bus terminals, arcades, and malls. Rarely are the exploiters who operate telephone call services, social networks, pedophile exchanges, sex clubs, and pornography rings arrested and successfully prosecuted. Yeah, those are the kingpins, but they're never touchable. Other high-profile cases that have not been investigated to the fullest extent of the law and prosecuted are, do I dare to read that?
Yeah, sure.
The Finders, Florida and Washington, D.C., Franklin Cover-Up, Nebraska, St. John's Abbey in Minnesota. Why? Federal and local investigations of trafficking, pedophilia, and sexual exploitation of children are initially honest and in-depth investigations. When a certain level in the investigation is reached, they are stopped or compromised. Why is this? $1 million payoffs are not uncommon. As heinous as these crimes of sexual exploitation of children are, an overzealous, uninformed law enforcement agency, prosecutor, social worker, mental health expert who uses less than scientific methods to conduct a witch hunt, can wreak havoc on our society and don't provide any real solutions. They consume valuable and very limited resources and help, allowing many offenders to continue their crimes against children unabated. Innocent victims are prosecuted and convicted. See Oversight, page 13. This problem was well documented in an article written by Lawrence Wright in May 24th, 1993 edition of New Yorker magazine. In this article, Mr. Wright describes how in some cases, after additional research was done, the recovered memory method was shown to be flawed, causing causing those cases to fall apart and resulting in the needless and unwarranted destruction of the innocent family. Now, I want to talk a little bit about locally here. I haven't put it on my blog yet, but I have been writing a blog entitled Dark, Dirty Local Secrets. And since I came here, I've heard an awful lot about some of the inner workings of this area, including a wife swapping ring in the very first year I lived here, which was 1994, and very real, active group of boomers, boomer generation folks. So they were my age at the time, and they're my age now. And a lot of pedophiles locally, a lot of bisexual or gay-leaning men, or maybe outrightly gay men, who hide behind their female beards. Many are married. There's a lot of stuff in this city that a lot of people are not aware of, and a lot of these people are local, prominent businessmen, and they're also elected officials, and they're also in power broker positions,
Very much so with,
in
and
government institutions.
there's a lot of money that runs through the hands of a lot of the folks in behind the scenes as well.
Right.
Some of
Well,
it public money.
and I'm not gonna mention names, although I know a lot of names. Jim, I want you to comment on that.
Yes, and the funny part of this, as I started, I said the key locations in Minnesota were Stearns, Morrison, Crow Wing, and Cass County. And I think I might have mentioned in the last show, when I retired and moved back here, many of the findings that we had when I came out here, including direct observations that I personally made at a go-go bar in Minneapolis. See, there was a Lieutenant Gary McGaughey, and just a quick thing with that was, when I spoke at the foundation over here a couple months ago, and I mentioned another Minneapolis cop by the name of Tidgewell. And after the meeting, an elderly gentleman comes up to me and says, he's a relative of mine, and he just died about 18 months ago. He says, that man lived in fear till the day he died because of the work he had done on human trafficking.
Wow.
So this is right here. This happened in this town just a couple of months ago. But anyhow, when we did that investigation, we actually saw sheriffs at there, and Lieutenant Gary McGaughey and them documented it. And so we had that. And later on, when I retired, I would interview Charlie Graff, the sheriff of Stearns County. He verified everything, and Charlie, in fact, before he died, sent me up here to talk to a former sheriff here by the name of Szalski, and I interviewed him, and I will tell you, it's one of the saddest interviews I ever did. I interviewed what I thought was one of the most honest cops I had ever dealt with, and what the man told me was just devastating. And he verified much of the stuff that I had. And the same when you go into Cass County, they forced a police chief to retire because of the work he was doing. And in Crow Wing County, we had all kinds of things going on there. So, yes, this has been going on. We did the investigation. Like I said, I started in the 66, actually, in the heavy stuff, and it's going on today yet.
Can you elaborate on that heavy, sad stuff that Szalski shared with you?
Yes, some of it had to do verifying the involvement of local people and different power people in the actual operation and use of promoting prostitution and actually moving the kids around. And later on, the Minneapolis Police Department, and what's interesting, when I called for McGaughey's reports about 2 years ago, evidently they all disappeared. And this had all been documented. So he had the whole file on what was going on.
So Szalski was aware that there was a prostitution ring going on
Oh,
here.
yes, not only that, but who was involved and who did it and all that stuff.
And so what was stopping the kingpin or pins from being prosecuted then?
Easy, he never got reelected. You know, he only served one term as far as I know.
Right, but what stopped him from prosecuting and nailing those people during his tenure?
The cover-ups that were going on, and who was covering up, he didn't tell me that. You know,
So
but
the whole thing was so
he just told me
complex.
he was stopped, yeah.
He just
So
didn't
there
get
was
the chance.
compromise going on.
Oh, yeah. He didn't tell me that. He didn't go into all of that. He just verified the facts that I had on the different trafficking things that we had observed and investigations that we had come up with. He verified it again, that we were right.
So, Teresa, you were gonna say something
Well, I
earlier.
was just, you said that you gave the date 1966, or the year 66. How long have you been doing this?
This July was 50 years.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes, and the one reason I've kept up with it, it was very early in my investigations, I ran across a young girl from Rockville, Minnesota. She was being pimped by a guy named Red Dog. And I never got her real name because in the world I dealt in, real names didn't mean anything. Nobody knew you by your real name. And she told me one time, she says, I says, well, how do I know you're from Rockville? She says, well, how do I know you're from St. Martin? And she says, well, she says, I was brought into this world by Dr. Herman Koop. And I says, that's the same doctor that brought me into this world. So I'm from St. Martin and you're from Rockville. Well, a couple of months later, the pimp killed her. And when I reached out to the authorities in Minnesota, Stearns County and every other place, nobody to this day has ever admitted that their daughter disappeared. And I find that just appalling, but not out of the ordinary. In fact, I find it to be very common that this happens in this area. And that's why the pimps knew, and I interviewed and talked to hundreds of pimps, why they came out here, because of that particular attitude and the cover-ups. You go around anywhere and talk, most families will have somebody that's a victim.
Yeah.
And, well, we never talked about it. In fact, I just got a letter, I have it with me, of a family, second generation now. And I knew the family, I grew up with them. And the second generation, the young boy, committed suicide in December. So they finally decided to go public. But that family has covered this up through 2 generations and never said anything.
Because it was too embarrassing for their
Yes,
family.
and it gives the family a bad name.
Yeah.
Now, this is one thing I cannot figure out. Why would anybody think it gives you a bad name and
To
let
have
it
been
happen?
victimized,
See,
yes.
and that's why these people know this, and that's why they can get away with it.
I wonder if
Well,
that is
because-
a rural Minnesota thing.
Well,
Yes, it is.
social stigma on rape alone.
Yes, there-
Say
yeah.
nothing about human
Yeah,
trafficking
yeah,
and
just rape.
prostitution, just rape alone.
Yeah.
You know, in my generation, as I grew up, if you were raped, many women didn't dare to go forward because you'd be questioned about how many guys you had dated,
Yeah.
were you drinking, were you wearing something sexually provocative, should you have been in that social setting, whether it was a party or bar or whatever. You know, our society does this kind of stuff. It puts the onus on the victim rather than the perpetrator. It's like the rules are upside down with everything.
Yes.
Just like, you know, with peace activism. The people who are promoting peace get made out to be the evildoers somehow. And the
bad guys.
war profiteers and those who are profiting off of war get made out like the real patriots and the real heroes. It's baloney is what
Well,
it is.
not only is history written by the winners, but current events are propelled by the winners as well.
Right.
But you have to look at this even for, and this particular thing is a whole show in itself. If you want to go into how come, why, what, where, when, and how all of this works. And we spent a considerable, I mean, with people that we had working with us, and I will tell the public one thing, there has never, ever been an investigation done at the levels that the New York City Police Department and later the New York State Select Committee on Crime did. It has never been duplicated. Nobody has ever done anything like it, and yet nobody is even interested in what came up out of it. And this I find very amazing, that when you see legislation pass and you really look at it, it has absolutely nothing to do with human trafficking. It is nothing more than politically correct, feel-good, do-good.
It's as if it isn't
Yeah,
happening.
and you go and identify here, I had an incident, and they told me that my information was old. As you know, we had started a Mothers Against Trafficking and Human Trafficking thing in St. Cloud, and it ended up going by the wayside. And they told me my information was old. Well, right at one of the meetings was a girl sitting across from me, and she was a prostitute. And at the end of the meeting, she told me an incident of a 15-year-old kid that was forced into it and that. And then she gave me information. And in less than 30 days, I had the identity of 32 pimps. And when I say St. Cloud, I mean the 4 counties that I'm talking about.
Okay.
And I had their names. And I went around and tried to get people to look at it. Nobody. When I went to the FBI, the guy said they had to check me out. And he knows real well who I am.
So you tried to talk to law enforcement and
Yeah.
they wouldn't hear you.
No, it's like this here now. You don't get any calls from law enforcement. I can't blame them. Any cop that was to go after this, his career is over. So don't blame the cops. Till we
No.
pass this law that protects them, you know, from somebody going after them, there is no way anything can be done. You know, and if, again, like I say, I have the names. I can give you cops, FBI guys, all of them who did it, who ended up being, and their careers ended.
Do you have the names of the perpetrators?
Oh, sure.
Not that I would ask you to give
Yeah,
them.
yeah, oh yeah, I got, in fact, one of them was just arrested in an arrest by the Wake Park Police, a guy named Israel Davis. There's been a couple of them, but he was number 3 on my list. And there's quite a story that goes with that. I was going to Iowa to speak at a national conference on human trafficking, and the lady known as Jane Doe 1 called the house to let us know that she had escaped her pimp, who was pimping her in Iowa City. And she was headed back to St. Cloud. Well, I had 3 days down in Iowa, and by the time I got back, she learned the lesson of trying to get out of prostitution. And what is known in the business as running the train on the girl had happened to her. And when I asked her, did they use the red hot coat hanger? And she said, no, they used knives. And later on, somebody at an association in St. Cloud had helped her, and they said, yes, we physically saw the cuts that they inflicted on her for trying to leave her pimp. Well, a couple of months later, I went to the Stearns County Commissioners of Stearns County and made the presentation of our resolution, and that girl was sitting in the front row. They didn't know it. And she was there in case somebody challenged my credibility. She was going to let them see the cuts to verify what I was saying was true. So this is the way this works. So if anybody doubts it, they should go ask the county commissioners of Stearns County if they know and had seen her.
Is this, by any chance, does this become, you talked about 2 generations of victims in one
Yeah.
family. Are there multiple generations of perpetrators?
Oh, sure. Yes, there are. Many of them. Many of them. And it's, again, it's not politically correct to speak about that part of it. But yes, there are, and I have run into them.
Do any of the victims go on to become perpetrators?
Many. In the pedophile world, it's very high. Again, remember one thing I say, everything I say is backed up with a case or something, or that I had. And in this particular case, I can use his name because he's dead. And I'd like the people to write his name down and look it up, is Ed Skull Murphy. He was the worst, Ed, E-D, Skull, S-K-U-L-L, Murphy, M-U-R-P-H-Y. He was molested first by his father, then when he was put in the orphanage, he was molested by the Franciscan brothers, and he ended up becoming one of the worst pedophile, murdering, extortionists I ever met in my life. But he would later testify in front of the New York State Select Committee on Crime and say that when he met Detective Rothstein and found that he was honest and had integrity, he finally felt he could do something. And I can personally tell you that man, the last days of his life were spent helping victims. And you will not believe what he did. He gave me, like I was telling you, Admiral Church and Forrestal, and it was hundreds of cases. In fact, the Dr. Jonathan Rubenstein, who was the guy that recruited me for the New York State Select Committee on Crime, based upon the request of Ed Skull Murphy, that's how I got on there. And he is going to be next year writing the book on Ed Skull Murphy. And he's also the guy that you'll see now, they're promoting this to Stonewall as a movie. He knew the truth about the Stonewall. There were only 3 of us that knew the truth on what happened at the Stonewall, which was the rise of the current, what they call the rights of homosexuals. That's not true. It was the start of the people who were there to destroy all rhymes or reasons of credibility. The gay people, the true homosexual, wanted no part of it because there was an agenda, and I had infiltrated these people, a 50-year plan to legalize sex with children. And that started, I first infiltrated that organization at the request of the gay community.
Because they were becoming implicated in it.
Well, yes, and it would destroy them.
Sure.
Because just, it just aggravates me when everybody seems to think that everybody that's gay is a pedophile.
Yeah.
That's not true. There's as many heterosexuals that are pedophiles as
Yeah.
gay people.
Yeah.
And it's just a politically correct thing that they
That's a way to
hijack.
deflect the
They
attention from the real.
hijack the true underground, and the reason for the Stonewall was that the police at the time, in fact, it was the first deputy police commissioner's office that was extorting, picking up payoffs. The mafia was picking up payoffs, and everybody. And the unit I was assigned to, as soon as we'd find out somebody was paying off, we'd arrest it. And Skull Murphy helped me set that up because once the payoff went down, he signaled, and we made the arrest.
Oh my gosh.
So this is what started it. So don't let sometimes when you get into this stuff, what you read as politically correct stuff is totally false. But in every case, there's always, the victims are just unbelievable. Robert Merritt, the guy that wrote Watergate Unclassified, same way, he was a victim and became a perpetrator. This goes on and on.
So it sounds as if you've often said that we need to protect the police so that they can do their jobs.
Yep.
We also need to protect the victims because they end up unable to come forward because they're compromised in many ways. And in some cases, it's just physical harm.
Yeah.
You speak and we'll cut you.
Well, and I know quite a few law enforcement people, and I've been told actually that there are a lot of cops who take sexual favors from the prostitutes and the victims.
Yeah, but
That's very common.
let me finish Jane Doe 1. Guess what happened to her? Just lately, I went to court with her. She was arrested for prostitution. Now, isn't this wonderful? She can't get help when she's a victim, and then they go and arrest her for prostitution.
When she has no choice.
Yeah, at the Stearns County Municipal League meeting 2 weeks ago, Jeff Howell, one of our local representatives, I told him about this. I says, where's the justice? Oh, he said, we pass laws that can't help, can't happen. Well, if you look at these laws, it's only for kids, children. What about the real victims? Can you imagine in our state, this time going, that a woman who tries to get out and then is arrested for prostitution and nobody can do anything after she's been tortured? Yeah. Give me a break. There's something wrong here. And that's why I do these shows.
Yeah.
The people got to learn the truth. You pay for this. You suffer for this, no matter who you are.
We're probably down to about 5 minutes, and so we don't have time to delve into this, but we'll start by teasing the audience to join us in the next segment where we're going to talk in depth about this letter that you wrote to His Holiness Pope Francis that exposes all kinds of corruption within the Catholic Church.
Yes.
And beyond, and so don't miss the next segment, folks. And we're also going to talk about my appeal and different things. Mm-hmm. But I want to get your take before this segment ends on what you think about 4 different crimes recently. Number 1, the missing girl from, I think it's Fargo State University, North Dakota University, a young 18-year-old that disappeared recently, and there was a young man that was missing. I don't know if he's been found yet or not. Left a bar over in, I don't know, remember it was Foley or somewhere east of here. And then just within the last couple of weeks, 2 gentlemen in their 30s drowning in the river mysteriously. There's no indication that homicide was used. If you want to just and relate that to, say, the smiley face killers, just give us your take on all of that.
And what you just mentioned here about the church started out as an investigation to find out what happened in the church and how they were compromised. That's what started this. It was not to find the pedophiles in the church. Now, what you're talking about is the smiley face killers. It is so real, it's unbelievable. I started off with a informant taking me to Untermeyer Park. Originally, it was the Son of Sam case, which then, when we started closing in on the Son of Sam in 1977, it started moving west along Interstate 9094, which just happens to run through Minnesota. Isn't that a miracle? But yes, and as my last count is about 27 victims. Professor from St. Cloud State did a big investigation on it with another New York detective for the for the smiley face killer stuff. So we know that's going on. In the Son of Sam case, there were 8 murders. Berkowitz only did 2. The other 6 were done by 2 guys from Minnesota, one from Detroit Lakes and the other one from Minneapolis, that were positively identified in St. Cloud.
In partnership with one another? Or
Yeah,
just, okay.
yeah, and originally the one guy came from Fargo, North Dakota. You have that young boy from, what is it, Sartell. To this day, nobody talks about it anymore. But all the signs are that they ended up dead in the river. The 2 people you have here in Little Falls are a little older than normal, but I don't write it off because you haven't heard anything about the 2 guys that drowned up here other than that they drowned. And that happens every day. People just walk in the river and drown, you know.
Yeah, 2 people who know each other and we're going
Yeah,
to meet down
yeah,
there.
and they end up drowning, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what this all goes into, and I'll gladly go in and explain how this whole thing starts with the church and why that was allowed to happen. And again, we mentioned on it with Father Bruce Ritter, where he had gotten a special dispensation to clean this up, and within 10 days the Pope was dead. So, and you'll find and every show I do on radio and stuff, they always ask me if I'm still a Catholic. Well, if I wasn't, I'd be a hypocrite, because if you're a Catholic, how can you condone this stuff?
Yeah.
That's the part that really bothers me.
Oh, there's a lot of broken Catholic hearts, I know.
Yeah, but why aren't they fighting it?
Don't know
that's
where
the
to
question.
start, or they
Yeah.
do start
Well,
and then they get
back
stopped.
it gets back to the same thing again.
Yeah.
What is going on here in this area? You know, how can you cover this stuff up? And when I first started, when I moved back here, there were 3 priests and 2 other individuals who came to me and said, you have to help us. So that's why I got into it here again. But we had done this at the highest levels. And it all came as a result of myself receiving a message to go to the federal courthouse in New York without a paper, pencil, or camera, and there was the file. And when I read that file, it told me exactly what happened, how our CIA, OSS at the time, and then we got the other stuff on the communists, which came under, for anybody to go on the computer, you look up what Bella Dodd testified to, you look under AA 1025, and you'll see how they infiltrated the church. Then you also have Bishop Nilitsa, and for that you look at Father Gruner and Kramer, who will explain that. So yes, I will gladly go into that and tell you exactly what that's all about.
Well, let's start our next segment with that, because I'm very interested in it. I
Yeah,
think we all
have
are.
2 minutes left, and there's a chapter in here called Effects on the Church.
Yeah.
And the first sentence of that reads, the church must understand that they have been compromised and that the majority of leadership is compromised.
Yep. It's
In the
just-
entire Catholic Church.
Yeah, and that goes the same with our government, why there's nothing being done to fight human trafficking and stuff. And you would be amazed, the senators and stuff that we personally identified and that I confronted face to face. And we can go into explain how it's a powerful thing. Our whole military, we haven't even touched on that. They decided, the good powers to be, that you put little boys and little girls together under stress and strain. It's been proven, and all the psychological stuff is in there about how they react, how Mother Nature reacts to that. What do little boys and girls do? Well, but what happens is now you have a young female, she's a private, and the general has sex with her. First of all, she's violated, but who's compromised? The general. I just had a case, they finally settled, she was an Air Force woman that was used for years and years, spent 10 years hiding in her bedroom. The VA finally gave her her benefits less than a month ago. That's what they did to one of these women. Why don't we hear? Our military is so compromised. Look at the DEA, got caught down in Colombia,
Yeah.
so, the Secret Service and all of them. What is going on? Doesn't anybody know when you do this, you're compromised?
I think they think that the old rules from long ago apply, where the press and everyone else are, in business to protect you, and you'll be fine as long as you know the right people. The problem is, if you know the right people, you're in that much more danger.
Yes.
Right. The other chapter, the crimes at St. John's, contrary to popular belief, Minnesota is not a safe, innocent place.
Yeah, this was written by a 15-year-old Albany High School student. So tell me the kids don't know what are going on.
Yeah.
There's
Very interesting.
Yeah, and she writes in there about a boy who committed suicide at that school who was a victim. And the kids don't know what's going on. They'll tell you. So don't, and this is what these school kids know this.
Do you think they're protecting the grown-ups?
Not the school kids know, but among themselves, they know what's going on.
Yeah.
So don't tell me that the adults don't know.
So watch the next show, folks, for the conclusion that includes all this powerful stuff that Jim shares about the Vatican and the corruption within the Catholic Church, actually.
Yes, it is. And like I said, it didn't happen on its own. And there was a reason for it. At the end of World War II, as powerful as the church was, it had to be destroyed for them to continue in some of their clandestine stuff. And we'll get into it, and I'll explain how some of this is information, again, firsthand, where the documents were there. The information is independent. When you look it up on the net, on the internet, you can find it if it hasn't disappeared. But I've got all that. I had that years ago already.
This is for conspiracy theorists and people who like that kind of Dan Brown Da Vinci Code puzzle. This is just food and drink. So yes, I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank Jim Rothstein, our good friend and faithful guest here. I want to thank Robin and Chris, our producer. And we hope to see you here again when we continue this conversation with Jim and touch on many other issues in our local milieu. So thanks again, and we'll see you soon.